week on the Stereo Image, we've got a guy that I'm a huge fan of. I've known David Silverman for, again, 20 years plus. He showed up at a little party Penn had at his house one year called Slam Stock, which was bands from noon until 6 a.m. the next morning, with an entire stage set up on his property. And it was complete chaos and nuttiness and fun. And this guy was there, and I said, "Who's that?" And he said, he's the guy from The Simpsons, David Silverman. And I talked to him a bit and found out that he played the tuba, and we connected and had a great time. And about 6 months later, maybe a year later, I was playing at the Jazz Bakery in LA, and I called him up to tell him I was playing there, and he said, "Oh, I could bring my tuba and sit in." And I thought, well, who doesn't need tuba? And Dave showed up, and I figured he has to be a good tuba player because you don't offer to sit in with strangers unless you're pretty competent. Well, it turns out he's more than competent. He's a great tuba player. And we played some, I think we played Basin Street Blues, New Orleans type stuff. And we became better friends. When I signed with Capri Records, and we were talking about the cover for my first album, I said, I don't want this like every other jazz album cover. We asked David to do the cover for my first album for Capri. And the album was going to be called Plays Well with Others because I had a series of solo albums out and I wanted to do a trio album. So Dave said, "I've got an idea." And it turned out that he thought that doing a parody of the famous Diane Arbus photo of a kid holding a hand grenade in Central Park would be funny with me in short pants holding a music note. And, clearly Plays Well with Others was the joke. And we loved it, obviously, which led to me asking David to do every cover of the past 4 albums that I've done for Capri. And he's knocked every single one of them out of the park. I mean, they're all just incredible. As I often say, don't listen to the music, just look at the cover. So anyhow, David Silverman has got a lot to say, and boy, does he know tubas. So let's hear what he has to say this week on the Stereo Image. Indeed. Well, here we are today with David Silverman, a good friend and great musician, and a guy that knows a lot about music and listens to a lot of music. And that's what we want here.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Silverman.
There you go. What do you know a lot about music? No, I will, we're going to edit this too, but I will also like billboard it and I'm going to talk about who you are before you get on. I won't mention any of the convictions. But I
see we're talking about The Simpsons, right?
No, yeah, I was going to not talk about The Simpsons because I figured that's all anybody wants to talk about with you. And I couldn't care less. It's for me, The Simpsons is a new show.
Brand new.
It came on the air when I started working gigs, and I never saw it. I'm serious. In the 80s, I was playing, 9 to 1 every night at the Ritz or at these gigs, and I heard about it and I saw some episodes and loved it, but it was never a part of my life the way it has been for generations now. I mean, basically, you've worked on. I've thought about it. You've worked on the Bible. You know what I mean? You worked on something that's in everyone's life.
The Simpsons has been part of my life, so that's all right.
Yeah, it's great. It's wonderful, and every time I've seen an episode, I've laughed my ass off. But
all right. But what are you here for?
We're talking here to talk about music and how everything. When you were a little kid, when did you sort of discover that music was something more than just noise in the background? When did you sort of get, what I mean? When did you?
I think very early on in my upbringing, early, like about 4 years old, my parents had a huge collection of classical music and jazz as well. And I think when I was very young, they, because it was like, this is a thing for kids. It's like, Peter and the Wolf, Prokofiev,
right.
and Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, Benjamin Britten, and
Mm-hmm.
Carnival of the Animals. It's sort of like intro type stuff. But I think it really, when I listened to it, I was listening more to it. Not that it was like, oh, this is fun music for kids. It was more like, this is really interesting somehow. This is
Right.
like really, this is like really like I'm very intrigued by what's going on with the sounds here. You know.
And
Sure.
where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up. Well, I was born in New York. All my family is from New York City.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, in
Oh.
when I was just actually I wasn't quite 3 at the time. My father taught at first in Long Island in chemical engineering at Stony Brook, and then
Mm-hmm.
transferred. He got a gig teaching at the University of Maryland, became a professor of chemical engineering there, and so that took us to Maryland, just outside of D.C.
Right.
My mother was an art historian, and she started working at the National Gallery of Art. So we had a
Oh.
kind of like, educated upbringing, but they were both very interested in the arts. My dad's very interested in theater and comedy and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things and film. So we had quite an interesting. My brother and I had quite an interesting time. I should
So,
mention too. At the age I was at 4 years old, the D'Oyly Carte opera company was touring, and we saw Gilbert and Sullivan. And my parents, didn't know how I would react at the age of
right.
4. Would I be? They were sort of like, well, if he's difficult, we'll have to take him out of the theater and all that. But
Right. Same
apparently,
today.
yeah, exactly. But I think it was 4, maybe it was 5. I can't recall.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, I was just transfixed. I
Really?
loved it. Both my
Mm-hmm.
brother and I, we both love it. My brother's 2.5 years older, and we
Uh-huh.
were both enthralled, transfixed. You know, not only were we not making any noise or being a difficult, we were just sort of like just looking wide-eyed and agog and just thrilled. So,
Wow.
so I guess yeah, it seemed worth mentioning because when I look back on it, I don't recall. I just recall always liking music, and I didn't have any one epiphany. Well, I will say this though. I mean, here's some interesting things.
Okay.
I hope I'm not going too long in this question.
No, you can't go. You can't go too long. This is wonderful. This is what we want. I mean, this is
Yeah.
what I want. I want to know this shit.
So when I guess I was maybe 5 or 6. I probably 5 or something. My parents decided to give me piano lessons, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, that did not stick. I don't know
Ah,
why. Piano lessons did not work for me. However, for some reason, even though I didn't really glom on to playing the piano, which more is a pity, right? And we could be
right.
doing duets right now. Um, uh, I did retain the ability to read music, or at least understand, music, how to
Right.
read music or what it was, and not only the music, but the phraseology and what all the
Right. Well,
everything meant. All the
how long did the lessons last? I mean, how long did you go before?
I think about 2 years,
Uh,
maybe from 5 to
oh, okay,
6.
that's a reasonable amount.
A
Yeah.
reasonable amount. So some of it, when when you're young, these things sort of get in. And what
Hmm.
happened was later, two things happened. I realized that there's a lot of music there that I liked, but I didn't know the titles of them, and I also
Hmm.
didn't know, well, what does it mean when it's a concerto? What does it mean when it's a symphony? And all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I remember humming something to my mom to say, because they had all these records, and I wanted to listen to whatever, like maybe Mendelssohn Symphony or something like that. And
Right.
he said, "Oh, that's the Italian Symphony by Mendelssohn, Symphony Number 4." And okay, and then I started asking, "Well, wait, what's a concerto? Oh, concerto. Oh, I get it. The solo instrument and the
Right.
orchestra
Hmm.
symphony." I started like
Right.
getting lingo down.
Hmm.
Um, By the way, I was listening to other things too. I was listening to, uh, I think I first listened to Fats Waller when I was 8 years old, and
Oh,
that
no
was
kidding.
big, opened my ears up to like, well, what's all this about? This is
Right.
amazing. Uh, and also, growing up as a kid, I was 6 years old when the Beatles hit, Ed Sullivan, or
Hmm.
7 years old. school and so forth, yeah, I was also like engaged in popular music as well. What happened really was a big changing point. I remember when I was 13, and I guess I hadn't really. It seems odd that I hadn't heard it, or that I hadn't heard the Rite of Spring, and I was
Uh-huh.
in I'm sorry, middle school, and I was taking a music class, and played like one of the parts of the Rite of Spring, and I was like, wow, actually the whole class, from
Really?
kids
Yeah, yeah.
with music to kids enthralled with music. That sort of like knocked everybody's socks off. Everybody's like, whoa, what is this? So I came home, and sure enough, we had a recording of Ernest
Mhm.
Ansermet
Oh
conducting.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, the great Ernest Ansermet. And I listened to it, and then I said, I gotta learn more about this stuff, or I wanted to learn more about this.
Hmm.
My mom had these books, these like large books from like when she played piano as well. She didn't really keep it up, but when she was
Right.
younger, she was quite a pianist. Um, and they were like these miniature scores of the Beethoven symphonies and the Brahms symphonies. And they're also like
Mhm.
annotated with arrows and like this is like motif and second motif and all that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. So I started following along to that. And
Okay.
then I got very interested in collecting miniature scores. The first one I bought was Scheherazade because
Mhm.
I was so fascinated by the great richness of the orchestration. And then it was a Rite of Spring because I said, okay, time out. I got to know what the
Yeah.
hell's going on here because this collection of sounds and combination in orchestration is really something interesting, and I want to know what's going on here. And
Right. And
you know what
it's
I mean?
so, yeah. I mean, it is so it's so different from Brahms or Beethoven or or Bach or all of what you grow up listening to and think of as classical music.
Yes,
This is like something out of nowhere. I
yes,
mean,
yes. And the other thing I was interested too was how quick the development of this was, because I was looking at the music of Brahms and then Stravinsky, 1911. It's not a tremendous amount of time when Brahms was writing his symphonies, and Stravinsky, came up with the Rite of Spring.
right, right. It's that's what blew me away when I was a kid. First of all, when I heard that stuff, I thought, well, this is classical music that was written centuries ago. You know what I mean? I mean, when you think of Beethoven, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, this guy was still alive in the 1940s. How
Yeah,
could he have written this incredible music and have not be some mythical figure,
right.
that in the pantheon of great, this wait a minute, this guy lived in L.A. It's like, you don't expect that.
Exactly. And then what happened is I went backwards. The first thing that I jumped into when it came to listening more tenacity to classical music was the 20th century. So
Uh huh.
I was listening to Stravinsky, and I basically
Yeah.
I listened to everything that he wrote, and I listened to everything Prokofiev wrote, and listened to
Right.
everything
And
that Shostakovich
Shostakovich and
and all
yeah.
these guys, and Walter Piston and
Right. Hmm.
Samuel Barber and
Yeah.
William
Copland.
Walter.
Uh,
Yeah, right. The whole,
yeah.
and then I started saying, "Oh, I got to learn more about." I mean, I like the music, and then then Mahler. Then I started going backwards,
Right. Right. You're going right. Well, that's a
and then
good way to do it.
yeah, and then I got really interested, and I really looked at Beethoven, and then Bach and Mozart. But Bach particularly strikes me like, wow, this is one of the pillars for everybody else.
Right. Right. But that's I was the same way with going back through Mahler from from Shostakovich back through Mahler to some of the earlier things because that's the stuff that sounded more exciting to me. You know what I
Right.
mean? I mean, it wasn't that Bach isn't genius. It is, but you hear it your whole life, and it sort of becomes background,
Yes.
until you can say, "Wait a minute, the Goldberg variations are really important." You know what I mean? But it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was probably wait. I mean, I've been playing piano my whole life, but when I heard the first time I heard Glenn Gould do his original recording of the Goldberg was probably, I was probably 15 or 16 years old
Right.
before I said, "Oh, wait a minute, this is really good." you know, and
Exactly.
this isn't it doesn't have the fireworks of a Stravinsky piece, or
Right.
or even a list,
Yeah.
but I'm like, oh well, they got all this from that. They, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
All this music came from there.
There's something to that because, like you say, I said I want to. I was listening to things that were really exciting, and the full the full orchestra is being used. I mean, some
Right.
people say, oh, Beethoven, those are the greatest symphonies. They're great. They are definitely the greatest symphonies, but he didn't have the full orchestra. The full
Right.
orchestra was a later invention, essentially. Not
Yeah.
the Beethoven orchestra was not the whole story as it was in the late 19th century. That's when the orchestra really became complete. But
Right.
what I was going to say, though, is that there's something about doing that and then going backwards, because I think the appreciation I have for Bach may have been magnified because I saw how it was basically inspiring others. And then I said,
Exactly.
right, as opposed to like listening to it first and said, okay, well, that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
No, I agree. I agree. You've got a bigger context to put it in, and it
Yeah.
also it took me a long time to get into like string quartets and writing, is to realize how, I mean, basically, in college, when you start
Right.
studying that stuff and analyzing it, you realize, just how incredibly important each voice is. And
You
then
know,
when you extrapolate that into orchestral writing, it's a whole different thing. Because I still think of, because I'm such a jazzy guy, I still think of orchestral writing in terms of big band arranging. You know what I mean? You're going to have your string section do this motif here, and you're going to have your horns come in here. And it became, to tear that apart in my early college years and realize, wait a minute, each voice is so important, and the lines that lead. Anyways, that's
yeah, yeah.
but
It's interesting. By speaking of string quartets, I kind of got into it a little earlier because we had this recording, of Shostakovich's this incredible elegiac Eighth Quartet, the
mhm.
famous Eighth Quartet, and I listened to it when I was really young. I was about 9 or something like that. I
Wow.
thought, oh, this is hot. This is really great. This is hot stuff, baby.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the other thing, talking about, you were saying, like, oh wait, this person lived in L.A. and so forth. And this Stravinsky's still alive. I was thrilled that I was like I guess in high school, and Shostakovich writes his 15th symphony. I'm like,
mhm.
hey, this is a new piece of music in my time. And by the
Right,
way, it's one of my favorite symphonies. It
yeah.
wasn't just like it's like, wow, this is cool and weird and it's great and it's genius.
It
So
is funny because yeah, I mean, it's akin to, oh look, Madonna's got a new album out. You know what
right,
I
exactly.
mean? I mean, it's but well, I got to meet Copland, Aaron Copland, and and it was just like, it wasn't even an event. It was just like, oh, he's conducting the Buffalo Philharmonic. I'll just go. And we went backstage and he signed my program,
To say how.
and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's name is on records. I mean, he's a real composer.
Well,
It's
the other thing that sort of brings another interesting thing. My dad, as I said, the dad's professor in chemical
Yeah.
engineering, radiation chemistry, and one of his closest friends who actually got him to come to Maryland was this guy, Bill Horniak. They were postdoc students together.
Mhm.
They both had their PhDs. And Bill Horniak, as his closest friend, taught physics at Maryland. Bill
Okay.
Horniak was married to this woman named Eva Stern. Now, this name Stern might
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Any
guess
relation to
who
Isaac? Yeah.
Isaac Stern was her brother.
Brother.
And yeah, and so my dad met Isaac actually just before he became an international star. I mean, he was
Wow.
basically, up and coming because we're thinking about 1946 or something like that.
Wow.
So I think this is pretty much at the very beginning of his,
Right.
illustrious career. And he knew that he was a genius, but they would hang out. I mean, they told me once they went to a New Year's Eve party I don't know if Isaac threw it or something like that.
Right.
But basically, it's just like Isaac and his buddies just like, so they whip out their instruments and they start
Sure, sure. Have a little hoedown.
My
Yeah.
parents were like, wow, this is amazing. And they're just
Yeah.
like chatting away, making jokes, having a good time, having
Oh
laughs.
man,
They were just marveling at the ability. They just pull out their instruments and they start playing, something by, Beethoven or whatever, without any music in front of them because it's just all up in there.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like it's a classical jam session.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's the changes to Beethoven's third.
Yeah,
but
basically. I'm sure they think about it. I imagine some of them, if they've studied enough music theory, they think that's how they. Well, I know that this is a progression, and this will help me remember what the melody is.
Well, back to you and your musicality.
So this is interesting. So here I am. I am reading scores. I'm really interested. And I have a huge. I basically, not only do I go to the LP, buying LPs like in Led Zeppelin, I'm going to the music store and buying, I got to get the score to, The Incredible Flutist by Walter Piston, and I got to get the score to, all this great symphonic stuff. I got to get the score to Prokofiev's Second because that's a wacko piece.
Right.
And
so give me AC/DC's latest album. And then while I'm there, I'll pick up some Sibelius.
Yes, exactly. I'll get this AC/DC, Sibelius Fifth, and Shostakovich's Sixth.
Right.
And I'm also like listening to we would go to the library and take that's how I learned a lot of Shostakovich, because I would go to the library and listen to it first and basically end up buying a recording, because I first wanted to check it out. Oh, but so starting in middle school, what was then junior high school, but we call it now middle school, I started getting friendlier with other musicians. Again, I'm listening and I have a great interest in music, and they have a great interest in music, obviously. One of my friends was Glenn McCormick, played the trombone, and Dave, I can't think of his last name, is a trumpet player. I start meeting all these people in band, and I start taking classes in music. And I get to high school, and a lot of my same buddies that I knew in middle school are there in the band. We have this wonderful band director that they all called Mr. Fonz, because his name was Alfonso Salazar.
Okay.
So, Fonzie was around.
Oh,
so
sure.
He was like Dr. Fonzie. And he was a wonderful guy. I mean, an incredible musician. He's from Chile, and he studied conducting, and he could play pretty much any instrument, well enough to demonstrate it for kids, and so forth.
Yeah.
And he was just this terrific guy, and he was an incredible pianist. I mean, he could one of these guys can look at a symphony score and start playing the piano.
Right.
Score, which is I don't know. That's quite a lot of staffs to look at.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of notes.
Yeah, but he was this wonderful guy. And by the way, when he's angry, the worst he would say was "doggone it," and that's when you know he was.
Ooh, vicious.
I know. Fierce. So he, and anyhow, two things were happening, and then I'm sort of quoting Jared Hoffman. I felt like I could not be just a observer anymore. I had to be a participant. But what should I play? And I got to tell you, early on, I started getting interested. I was more kind of drawn to the lower. I was always interested in what the low instruments were doing, like the tuba, like the bass clarinet, like the double basses, like the concert bassoon. It's like I was just very interested in that low anchoring aspect.
Right. Yeah. The
symphonic writing, especially later romantic writing. Starting with Berlioz, really, I think I'm not starting with Berlioz, but really, I think in some ways because he was utilizing Berlioz was utilizing the new instruments, the valve.
Right.
They were. Look at these French horns with valves, and the trombone opened up. I always wondered why the trombone wasn't utilized chromatically earlier, but so one trombonist, as I'm getting off of this track, but one trombonist said, but possibly, that the slide wasn't as efficient as it became, as improved it. Who knows? Whatever reasons, or maybe it was just sort of thought as a church instrument. But in any event, the brand new things were coming out. The valve and basically the tuba, or the predecessor. People y'all may not know, is something called the ophicleide. The ophicleide, which was a keyed bass horn, which is the first really keyed bass horn. There was a serpent that nobody used before, which is actually not really a brass. It was made out of wood, but they called it a brass horn. But the ophicleide was a keyed bugle. The keyed bugle was the other thing happening, by the way. It was like compact cassette and the 8-track, which was going to win out.
Yeah, what's going to win out?
Yeah, and the rising technologies at the beginning of the 19th century was valve technology and keyed bugle technology, if you will, like basically treating a brass horn like you would a clarinet and a flute. And the valves, the piston valves won, or the piston and rotary valves won out. They were the 8-track, they were the compact cassette, and
the disc.
The bugles were the 8-track.
The laser discs.
By the way, except there's one interesting artifact of it, because the ophicleide, this was the predecessor of the tuba in the orchestra. That's why the first in Symphony Fantastique was originally written for 2 ophicleides.
Really?
Yeah. And also, there's a famous tuba part in the Midsummer Night's Dream overture for Mendelssohn that he wrote when he was like 16. But it was originally written for the ophicleide.
Wow!
But the tuba came up in 1835, and kind of maybe realized this is a much better sounding horn. However, this Belgian guy, Adolphe Sax, maybe you heard of him?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he was an instrument maker. And guess what he was making at that time?
The trumpet? Was he working on a trumpet?
He actually did do a line of sax horns, but he was primarily working on, in the 1840s, he was focusing on, I think, bass clarinets, which he made quite some improvements to this day.
Ooh.
And ophicleides.
Really?
Yes.
Now,
and so you basically, clearly he had an ophicleide and he had a clarinet mouthpiece, and he put it on the ophicleide one day, and that that evolved into the saxophone.
Wow. Now, do any of these, I'm certain that some of them must still exist.
Oh, yes. And there are many people. You go on YouTube and look up ophicleide. It's what is it? OPHEID. It's just, look it up.
Okay,
I'll look it up.
It'll spell check it for me. It'll spell check it into for like, are you okay?
Exactly.
You
will find probably a plethora of people who are playing the ophicleide and championing it and saying it. If you do
come back,
you should play with the ophicleide, not with the tuba. And they're crazy. I appreciate your using the original instrumentation.
Period instruments, yes.
But it sounds terrible. You want to use the tuba.
Well,
by the way, and also in Berlioz's times, yes, he would. He wrote it for the ophicleide, but he eventually would write it for tubas. Also if Berlioz is traveling around, he uses whatever that is available with whatever band he can put together.
Exactly. We can't get a bass.
Right.
But just played a little strings.
Like back then, they didn't have established symphony orchestras at that point.
Right. No, they would just put together. That was
put together a pickup band.
Yeah.
Who's playing that? We only have 3 violins. Okay, well, make do.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm
in high school and I'm getting interested. And the other thing that I'm listening to that I got really interested is Preservation Hall Jazz Band.
Okay.
And they were this is like the early 70s, and they're kind of all over even the late 60s is when I really discovered them. So they've been around since 1961. Alan Jaffe and Sandra Jaffe started the organization and touring everywhere, and they came to town, and we went to them, and I thought they sounded great, and I really liked Alan Jaffe on the tuba. I thought the tuba sounded pretty cool, and then So Dr. Fonz was decided to teach a class in sort of like kind of basic music theory, you know, chord progression
Right.
and an arrangement. And he taught it was like a half-hour class, like during lunch hour. And so I took that and I got interested in, you know, writing and arranging. And there was this tuba sitting on a stand that did not move from week to week to week. Oh, and the other thing that well, I'm going to get to that in a second.
Sure.
So I asked him at the end of the year, it's now June and we're going away for summer vacation. And I said, Dr. Fonz, do you mind if can I borrow that tuba and try to learn to play it over the summer? And he looked at me and he said, oh, would you? He was so happy. I never saw somebody so happy in my life.
The only time anyone's ever been happy about a tuba.
Exactly. He basically said, "Yeah, nobody's played it, and I'm not getting anybody from the junior high schools with anybody playing the tuba." So yeah, I learned it over the summer rather quickly, and I think in retrospect, and somebody else pointed this out to me, somebody said, "Well, you've been studying music for many years. You just didn't have a horn in front of your face."
True.
That's true, because I knew how to read music. I knew what everything meant, so I wasn't learning how to read music. Learning the instrument.
You're just learning how to make it sound on the instrument.
Right, and I understood. I think intellectually about phrasing and and what to do with a line of music. Maybe that helped as well. So I had some musicality understanding, I guess.
Well, I have a stupid question because that's what I excel at.
Yes.
Do you think that wanting to look at miniaturized scores and all of that visually was interesting to you in terms of, because you're obviously a visual artist?
Oh, you mean sort of like the
actual looking at the scores? Yes.
There's an elegance,
the patterns and the
yes, absolutely. There's an elegance, as you say. There's a great visual thing of it, of looking at a score, because when you look at the score and you hear the music, you can sort of see the music, right? Because of this beautiful pattern that the full score is presenting to you, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because later when I was studying animation at UCLA, and I was, working on an exposure sheet where you write down like all the drawings that you have to do to shoot, frame by frame. It's almost like a score.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Here's what's happening in the animation as we're going along.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that. But so right now you've just found your voice as a musician. The tuba.
Another thing that I think inspired me to pick the tuba as well, just at the same time, is Woody Allen's film Sleeper had come out, and that was music by Preservation Hall and Woody Allen's New York band. That he had. It was a combination of both them playing, different tracks on it, and I really liked, again, the sound of that tuba bass line. It just sounded like fun. And also, tuba's kind of funny. I think you have to have a sense of humor playing the tuba. Everybody I know who plays the tuba and they play it seriously, they still have a sense of humor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's something about, I physically, there's something about being in the presence of a low, as you said, like the low things appeal to you, bass and bass clarinet. Yeah. It vibrates, in your body. It's a good feeling. You know what I mean?
Yes, and it's a great thing about the tuba, or the string bass as well, is that you can lay down the beat, right?
Right.
And also it has a great sound to play a solo. A solo line. It sounds great. Yeah,
you don't hear a lot of angry tuba players.
And I think because it's not, and I think it's kind of great in a way that it's not that prevalent. Because when you have like a tuba solo or a double bass solo in a symphony, or or even in a jazz thing, it's unexpected, and people aren't used to that sound, and it sounds great, and it's kind of oh, that's great,
Yeah.
By the way, it reminds me of this really interesting story, and it's often repeated. Tommy Johnson, one of the great tuba players of recent times, he passed some few years ago, but he is on about 2,000 film scores, and he was John Williams' number one guy, and he played. Actually, just sight read, off the cuff. He was actually caught in traffic, and he came running into a scoring session of Jaws, and he had this tuba part in the bump 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 bump,
sure.
And the tuba goes bump
right, sure, yeah,
and it's a great part. And of course, Tommy nailed it, even though he was just running in, sitting down.
Wow.
Hadn't warmed up, but he asked John, it's interesting that you scored that for the tuba instead of like the French horn, and I'm just sort of curious why you chose that. And John said to him something along the lines, "Well, I wanted it to sound, I wanted to have a sound that was different to the audience, that they wouldn't quite recognize it, because it almost." Is that a French horn? No, it's not. It's
right.
And it has a more mournful sound. And said because it's such a high range for the tuba, it has a more mournful sound. There's maybe more anxiety in it. So,
wow.
So again, it was interesting how he was utilizing people's unfamiliarity with the tuba in that register to get a desired effect for the score.
Yeah,
or the accompaniment of the visuals.
Right. And I mean, for average people, they think of tuba as, is either in a traditional jazz band or a polka, or oompa, and it's great to hear, obviously as a classically trained musician, you're used to hearing it in symphony settings and in large ensembles. But for, the average Joe on the street, they don't think of that, and so when it comes across in Jaws, they're like, "What's that? What's that?
I have
what's
no
that
idea.
sound?" Yeah, and it's and it's really wonderful. Well,
so I should say, so going back to that, so when I came back after my summer,
after your summer,
he sort of threw me into the deep end. We played band transcriptions. We had a band. We didn't have an orchestra.
Right.
We're playing band transcriptions of Rossini overtures. So of course you're playing the double bass part, and there's we played, I think, both of the Gustav Holst music for military band, which have very challenging parts for the tuba. We played a whole lot of things that required me to really step it up, and so I did that, and then I went to University of Maryland first, and then to UCLA, and both times I joined the concert band. When I got to UCLA, I was they really wanted me to join the marching band. I came to UCLA as a junior to study animation. You obviously go to the animation workshop, which in the film department is an incredible amount of time taken up. And I said, guys, I don't have time for the marching band. It sounds like fun, but I don't have time to do that.
Right.
And so I get my bachelor's degree, but I stick around to get a master's degree in animation, mainly because I'm still working on a film that I haven't finished. And there are other interesting classes that I'm taking. So they come to me and say, "Okay, David, here's the deal. The bulk, about 2/3 of the band, is going to Japan for 8 days in the later part of December for something called the Mirage Bowl, which is sponsored by Mitsubishi. It was a regular season college game played in Japan at the Tokyo Stadium. And you can look it up, the Mirage Bowl. I forget how many years it did. It was UCLA versus the Oregon Ducks. And if you join the marching band, you're coming along. What do you say? I said, okay, I'm in.
And what year was this?
1979.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So,
Yeah. So.
by the way, I had a great time, and also not only did I have a great time, but I really became. It was, I think, formative in many ways because I was kind of something of a shy kid in some
Mhm.
respects, more sort of quiet spoken, but I became more boisterous, if you will.
Uh-huh.
First of
Uh-huh.
all, they had like, squad leaders, like every group of four was a squad leader or something like that. And I
Mhm.
became one of those guys. I also became the band Cartoonist. So everybody knew who I was and,
Mhm.
and liked what I did. So it
Let
was
me
used.
let me just interrupt you there.
Yeah.
I've been in a lot of bands since my
Yeah.
single digits. I've been in dozens of bands. We have never ever had a band cartoonist, and I think that's disgusting. I
That's
really
terrible.
think I need to
That is
talk to
terrible.
somebody about this.
That's a terrible thing. I guess college bands, I guess, because we put out flyers for it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
They wanted a band cartoonist to do
Wow.
illustrate. Well, I did like their shirts and things like that.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting
Wow.
though. I did do artwork for the Maryland bands actually because
Jeez.
well, that was the other thing too. I guess I didn't talk about that. That drawing instruments and drawing musical drawings sort of connected to what I was doing artistically.
Right.
I started drawing for like the when I was in the high school, for the
Mhm.
flyers. Even this is before I joined the band, actually.
Right.
I did a drawing of an orchestra when I was 17, inspired by Jared Hoffnung, the great British cartoonist who also was a tuba player, coincidentally.
Wow.
I didn't know that when I discovered his artwork, but he was a humorist, in England, illustrating for Punch and other publications.
Mhm.
He did a whole series of cartoon books about the orchestra, like one called The Conductor, and one like
Oh, wow.
all
Now,
these.
well,
And
we
also,
didn't.
he did a bunch of comedy concerts called the Hoffman Interplanetary Music Festival, where he commissioned people like Malcolm Arnold to write
Really?
something called a grand what was it called? I think a grand orchestra for a grand this is serenade or something like that for orchestra, vacuum cleaners, floor polishers, and rifles. This is all
Nice.
pre-PDQ Bach. This is a few years
Right.
before
Right. Right.
Chickley, and I'm
Now,
sure a combination of Spike Jones and Hoffman probably inspired Chickley.
wow.
So I show this drawing. I go to a rehearsal, thanks to our high school band director,
Mhm.
Dr. Fonz, of the National Symphony. So I go there to rehearsal, and we start getting chummy with the concertmaster because he's a kind of goof, and he's like joking around, like he's playing intently, and he looks at us and he rolls his eyes, and he's playing the
Sure.
same
Yeah.
thing over and over again, and realize, okay, these guys have as much of a sense of humor as we do.
Mhm.
So I go to the concert and I go backstage and I show him, I had made a poster of this drawing, and he looks at it and he's like, kind of like slack
Yeah.
jawed.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I go back and he says he wants shows it to the conductor and also the head of the orchestra, not the artistic head, but the business side of it.
Right.
And I give them my pitch right then and there. I said, I have this idea of doing a caricature of the National Symphony Orchestra. And he said, well,
And how old
let's
are you then? This is like
18.
17?
I'm 18.
All
I'm
right.
like,
Sure.
I just turned 18. I'm like 3 months into
Hustling.
being 3 months into
Sure.
being 18 at this point. So I'm getting a
Uh-huh.
handle of being 18.
Sure.
And I'm about to go to University of Maryland.
Mhm.
And so I have him, I meet with him and I say, here's my thought is I would go to, if I have complete carte blanche to go to rehearsals, I'll sit in the concert hall. I won't bug the musicians with field glasses and I'll sketch them and then I'll put it together one large drawing kind of based on this drawing that I did in the first place.
Right.
And he's like, sounds good to me, kid.
Why not?
Whatever,
Yeah.
why not? No skin off our nose. And it was great too because the tuba player David Bergunier was also the personnel manager for the orchestra, and so he was great. He basically also taught me, and he corrected everything that the first teacher did wrong for me. The first teacher I had was actually a trumpeter. So,
Okay.
and Dave looked at me and said, "Okay, let's see. We got a few things to fix right away."
Right, right.
We're doing
Wow.
we're doing what I call the smiling embouchure, where I sort of like smiling like this. So you want to go along like this. And the thing that he really taught me, which was really interesting, he said, the thing about playing the tuba, or as you get a larger mouthpiece, you don't want to drop the jaw. So he said, imagine that there's like a cork in your mouth when you're playing low. And it was really eye-opening. It's interesting, too, because I remember talking to trumpeters saying, oh, yeah, my jaw is like this. Which makes sense because you're talking. You're very. In case you're wondering, ladies and gentlemen, I'm demonstrating this. You can't see it, but
well, yeah,
that's silly.
It's very impressive to see.
Yeah, but that was anyhow. He just taught me a whole plethora of interesting approaches that changed it. So so between the ages of 18 and 20, just before I got to UCLA, I finished this gigantic 6x4 foot ink drawing of the entire National Symphony Orchestra, caricaturing everybody. There's no rando faces or all the actual musicians at the time. And they made a poster of it, and it was a premium in their radiothon,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So when I get to UCLA,
yes. Don't let me slow you down.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to keep going off.
No, this is wonderful. I mean, it's. I'm doing nothing. I'm going to make French toast. But
I get to UCLA in the animation workshop. I meet this great guy. We've been friends ever since, Charles Solomon. And Charles, who's since become a long-standing animation critic, film critic, and writer of many books on animation, he and I met in the animation workshop at UCLA, and he was already a stringer critic for the LA Times. And the music critic there, Martin Bernheimer, knew that he was in the animation workshop and said, Charles, do you know any artists that have an affinity for drawing classical musicians for a reoccurring article I want to do for the Sunday calendar section called It Only Hurts When You Think? And Charles says, I think I have the guy for you.
Wow, yeah.
So he told me about it. So I just did a bunch of just sort of kind of rough drawings for him to see if it would work. And the next thing I know, he publishes the rough drawings. I was like, wait, I don't want you to publish.
Yeah.
They're half baked.
Right.
And so I start doing that. Now that leads to a guy named Sandy Feldstein, who works at a company called Alfred Publishing, which some of you might know, Alfred Music Publishing.
Yes.
And he gets me involved with Alfred Publishing. This is like 1980 now, and or maybe 81. And I do 4 drawings for publicity. And then he said, we're doing a new line of piano books, Alfred's Basic Piano Library. And why don't you, quote unquote, audition for it with the guy, Willard Palmer, who's writing the books. So I do. And I show him some drawings based on the books and he's like thrilled with my drawings. And so I ended up illustrating the whole series.
Wow.
They're still in print, by the way.
Wow. Yeah.
So, so I got to say, one thing leads to another. And,
What led you to start doing the jazz gigs that you did? You were doing with your band, all that kind of stuff.
All that jazz came about later. Okay, so I am, even though I took that class on the sort of music theory class, I didn't really learn a lot about chord theory per se. Right. And so I was just basically a guy that had to you got to give me a sheet of music with little black dots on it.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to know what to play. Also, there was a period of time for about 12 years I didn't have a tuba. I think there was a time when I left college and I couldn't really afford a tuba. So between 1983 and 19 I think maybe it's a little less than that. Maybe it's about 1990 or something like that.
Okay.
I didn't have so I didn't really. I played occasionally, but I didn't get a chance to play that much.
Right.
So then I basically realized, oh wait, I work for on The Simpsons. I can afford a tuba, so why not get a tuba?
Well, yeah, that's a perk. But,
so what happened was, this is getting back to now, by the way, I start working on The Simpsons in 1987 on the Tracy Ullman show.
Right.
By the way, March 23rd, 1987, it was the first time we did the first Simpsons short, Goodnight Simpsons. So that's coming up in 38 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Now I'm working on The Simpsons, and I become director along with Wes Archer and other people. They make me supervising director, and I'm a producer on the show. And then I get a call from DreamWorks in 1996, and I've been on the show now 9 years. And I think, well, The Simpsons can't last forever.
Right.
And also, this is an opportunity maybe to direct, an animated feature, which at the time in 1985, 1986 was not a easy proposition to come by, because DreamWorks is starting up their own studio. So I go to DreamWorks, and I worked there for 2 years, and then I basically get wooed over to Pixar. Literally a call from Steve Jobs moves me over to Pixar. And so now I'm at Pixar, and I'm co-directing on Monsters, Inc., which is a great film. But the other thing that's interesting at Pixar is there's about, 6 or 7 people who love playing music, different instruments. Bob Peterson, our head of story, plays trumpet. Pete Docter, who's direct, it was his concept for Monsters Inc., and he's now runs Pixar on the creative side. He's an excellent musician. He and his sisters all learned to play string instruments. So he plays violin, mandolin, bass, and he learned the Suzuki method. So he just can pick up.
Oh, wow! Yeah.
He can pick up a melody out of thin air, and he knows the melody, he knows the chords and everything. Both his sisters are professional musicians. One plays cello at the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and the other teaches in Cincinnati. And this other great guy, Bud Luckey, isn't that a great name? Bud.
That's
Luckey.
A good name. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like the oldest guy there. we were all in there, all 40 and younger, and he's in his late 60s. And he is this guy from Montana, this guy talking like this. And he did a whole bunch of things for Sesame Street, like Near and Far, Ladybug's Picnic. He animated and wrote music. He plays banjo. And he was really excited that we have a tuba player here. We can have a really good band. And we form a band called the War Room Rascals. Which,
again, was never said publicly. We need a tuba player to have a good band. I don't,
because playing
yeah, exactly. No, you need it for that. Yeah,
you need a bass.
I mean, what goes better with banjo than tuba?
He helped teach me chord progressions.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm getting to. At Pixar, I really learned how to play. How to work with a chart, and not have to worry about the notes. First, I got a book on chords, just a great thin book. Then I'd this is the C7. This is a diminished chord. This is the, et cetera, all the chords in the world, including complex, 11th and 13th and all that kind of stuff. And then he got me these recordings, essentially Music -1, that have a CD and the music, and you play the bass line along to this.
Nice. Yeah.
And I remember playing with him once. He's playing banjo, and I'm playing just the two of us after hours. And literally, I felt the penny drop. That I was like, oh, I get it. I see the chord.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I just need a chart, and that'll be all I need, and then I'll be fine. And I just started practicing with them. While I was at Pixar, I just became more proficient at it. And then, the other thing that happened was going to Burning Man. I started going to Burning Man in 2001. I've been every year since. And at Burning Man, there's the Burning Band, which I joined up with. It almost I think the second or third time I was there. And the Burning Band is actually an outgrowth of this organization in the Bay Area called the Los Trancos Woods Community Marching Band, which was a group of ex Stanford band members. In 1961, they formed. Now, everybody knows how the Stanford band is this crazy band, and people wear crazy outfits, and they don't do formations. They just run to one formation to another, and it's a very, it's very iconoclastic. Well, they weren't always like that. When my friends of the Los Trancos Woods band were there, it was a very uniform, straight-laced, men only, because it's 1960, band. Well, the Los Trancos band was the polar opposite. They're basically a drinking band with a marching problem, and and wearing crazy costumes. No rehearsal, no marching, no whatever. And the Stanford band, during the Summer of Love, takes their cue from the Los Trancos Woods band and basically imitate what they're doing. I say this is a backstory. These are the guys that I hook up with at Burning Man.
Right.
And I start playing along with them, and then they really say, "Hey, you're really good," and I'm like, "I am." So that's how things developed in playing more traditional jazz. And then things also start happening. I go to a jazz. I've been going to Jazz Fest since like '95.
Wow.
And I meet up with Ben Jaffe in 2002, and we just kind of hit it off, We've just become very good friends. And he has me sit in a few times with Preservation Hall. Right. And then later on, through another friend of mine, I meet people other musicians in New Orleans, people like Paul Sanchez and John Boutte. And then I meet one of my heroes, Matt Perrine, probably one of the top tuba players on the planet, I would say. Certainly in New Orleans, but he's totally one of the greatest tuba players, one of the greatest brass players. He's just an incredible musician, unbelievable musician. And that opens up, my world, and I start meeting other musicians there, including, Craig Klein and his group Bonorama. And I've seen that. And I just start meeting all these other musicians in New Orleans, and I sit in and I play, they're always happy to let you sit in, and if you do well, you can stick around. If you're terrible, you say, get out.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for stopping by. But well, I mean, Jesus, we're already like an hour into this thing, and I haven't even started.
You have some questions because no.
I don't have. I mean, it's not an interview show. It's a conversation show. You know what I mean? It's just you talking shit and me listening, and But I think the only real question I came into this with that I've sort of wanted to ask you is, obviously, with your animation stuff, music is a huge part of it. What do you listen to when you're creating stuff, playing in the background, or do you do that? Do you listen to music while you're drawing or while you're creating art?
I used to. I don't do it as much now. I find that I need to just sort of focus, especially if I'm doing animation and I'm listening to a soundtrack. It's or dialogue. Right. It's hard to listen to music. I used to listen to a lot of classical and jazz music when I would work, or other things too. I'd listen to David Bowie or Talking Heads or Nirvana or something like that. Different things, along with jazz, traditional jazz, or later jazz, or I got later into people like Miles Davis and and Coltrane and things like that. So it would be. I would listen to anything. Actually, you're making me think that now. Yeah, when I work today, do some drawing, I should listen to something like.
Well, I mean, like
Art Tatum or something like that.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Well,
have you heard of Art Tatum? He's pretty good.
I've heard him. And I've talked to people. I mean, obviously, growing up listening to having 2-player pianos in my house, and my dad being a big jazz fan. When he brought home the first Art Tatum record, I couldn't understand it. I mean, it took me 10 years to even grasp what he was doing. And
go ahead. I was going to say this. I didn't mean to jump in, but I'm thinking of one more thing to say in terms of my musical development, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I have to thank. I'm very. One of the things I did that helped expand my musical experience was smoking cigars.
Okay.
And the reason why is I joined this club in Beverly Hills called the Grand Havana Room Cigar Club. So, and two things happened. There's this wonderful, hilarious bartender who I only knew by her name Lou, and she was this sort of redhead that would be at the bar with her arms folded with a glare, kind of in the look, and saying, "Okay, what do you want?" You know, she was really very funny. And very feisty and great fun. We became friends. One of the other members there, who became a good friend of mine too, is Peter Weller, the actor, famous for RoboCop and other things. Yep. Also a fairly good, quite a good trumpet player. Very good trumpet player.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, very good trumpet player. Was a good friend of Miles Davis.
Wow.
So he would have a band. Actually, I'm playing with him tomorrow. I got to rehearse.
Oh, geez. Okay.
But he had me sit in with them. You know, he has a 5-piece band, including himself, and I just sat in and played a couple of traditional, New Orleans tunes. Yeah. They're playing a little bit more modern jazz, the trad jazz. Right. She hears me, and she tells me that she and her husband have this band called Vaught and the Villains. Would you like to see it? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And I watch it, and it's fantastic. And I meet her husband, Andy Como, who's also an actor, and we hit it off. And then, we talk about maybe sitting in or something like that. And then they perform at the Halloween Carnival Festival in Santa Monica. I'm sorry, not in actually West Hollywood, on Santa Monica. And we just came there. We showed up in costume as a New Orleans style street band. That was sort of our presentation. And we just sort of played. And, I knew all the tunes. I had no problem, or if I didn't know it, I could figure out the bass line.
Sure.
So that was in Halloween 2008. And then in the beginning of January, I get a call from Andy, and he says, "Do you want to come to rehearsal this Friday and join the band?" And I say, yes, think about it.
Nice.
So that's how that came along. And so, I joined the band, and we, I'm afraid we performed throughout between like 2009 and 2020. Right. In 2020. Yeah. And then COVID came around and kind of knocked the wind out of the sails of it. Well, hopefully we'll get back together. But that of course was a great experience for me. Like being in a band, playing all the time, touring a little bit. That was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I imagine.
And I have cigar smoking to thank for it, because if I hadn't,
there you go.
I hadn't gone being a part of the Grand Havana Room, who knows if I ever connected with that band. Right.
Well,
I recommend taking up cigar smoking.
Yeah, well, for the kids out there. The younger the better. I can't thank you enough for all this, and I think I can't get over thinking there's much more to talk about, but I know that you have stuff to do, and I think we've got so much material here that we want to do this. Maybe we want to do this again.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I was going to give you another little thought, but why don't we do this again, because I can talk more about these things and other things.
Yeah, because I really I hate to say it, but you're a fascinating character.
That's fair. So are you. We talk about what you do.
We all know what I do. I play at a magic show. But no, David, I really can't thank you enough. This is really wonderful.
You play in a traveling medicine show. I know.
That's right. I've got some stuff for your whooping cough that I sell out.
That'd be great. You may notice. You have to excuse me, folks. I have a slight cold. About this big.
Oh no, I didn't notice at all.
Good.
But our regular listeners will phone in, all three of them. But no, this would be great, and I would love to do it again.
Sure.
In all seriousness, because I don't know that many people. So the more that I get on the show, I can get multiples. It's really been fun and fascinating. And so we'll talk soon.